FM News Talk
97.1. You're listening to The Mark Cox Show.
Out in the street, it's 6 a.m. Another sleepless night. 3 cups of coffee, but I can't clear my head from what went down last night. I know we both have our own little ways, but somehow we keep it together. You hear me talk, but you don't hear what I say.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
What a horrible woman she is. Nancy Pelosi, 7 years ago today is when the monstrosity, the bureaucratic train wreck known as Obamacare, the Unaffordable Care Act, became law. The president signed it into law 7 years ago today, and tomorrow it's possible the House could vote to repeal it. It's been a long 7 years. We're joined right now by Hadley Heath Manning from the Independent Women's Forum. She's the policy director there. Hadley, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, great to have you. Glad we could get a little bit of your time today. The president was sounding, and the White House, sounding fairly confident, along with Paul Ryan, that they're going to be able to get the votes they need to at least get this thing through the House. What's your take on the Affordable Care Act and the few tweaks they've made to it the last couple of days?
Right. So the American Health Care Act is 2 debates that are happening at one time. You know, on the one hand, we have the policy debate about what's actually in this piece of legislation. Can we get consensus, at least among the Republican members? Because it's not just a repeal. I mean, it repeals most of the Affordable Care Act. Unfortunately, it leaves some of the harmful regulations in that law in place. But it also adds some things. So it's like a replacement plan. So it's 2 for 1, repeal and replace. So the policy debate is one part of what's happening here. But the other debate that I think is very important for members of the public, and especially in the Republican base, to understand is that there's a real strategy debate going on within the Republican Party about how to pass repeal, because, you know, there's fear that we don't have 60 votes in the Senate. I think that's a legitimate fear to avoid a filibuster there. And so they're trying to use this budget reconciliation process where you only need 51 votes in the Senate. But that really limits the ability of Republicans to include some of the things like those regulations that I mentioned. The regulation, for example, that requires insurance companies to offer policies to everyone regardless of their health status or health history. We refer to that as guaranteed issue in the health policy world. So regulations like that are going to remain on the books, much to the disappointment of a lot of conservatives. But we hope that maybe if this law passes out of the House, it can go to the Senate and be amended there. And there's going to be opportunities for Republicans who now control the administration to make changes through the Department of Health and Human Services, and also on down the road with future pieces of legislation. So many Republicans, especially in the House leadership, feel like this is the best thing that we can do right now to pass this American Health Care Act out of the House and send it to the Senate. But, of course, there's been considerable opposition, not just from Democrats, but even within the same party. So it's been a tough road.
I think Paul Ryan and gang, the ones that are pushing this, knew what the CBO score was going to be. And
yeah.
I think they saw that coming. Unfortunately, the people that want to keep Obamacare, the Democrats, back during the election, I called it the greatest political action committee in the world, which was the mainstream media, which is on their side, took those numbers and ran with them. And I think the average American who doesn't pay as close of attention as radio talk show hosts and some other people that listen to talk radio, people who aren't junkies, walked away from this convinced that 26 million people would no longer have health insurance. And I heard Paul Ryan say that the CBO score didn't take into effect the 3 different steps that they planned to do to implement the new plan. Do you agree with that logic?
Well, I do. I think, the CBO is going to score health legislation based on certain assumptions that may not always prove true in reality. The CBO is the same organization that said there would be 24 million people signed up for the exchanges where people can get the Obamacare subsidies. And in fact, fewer than 12 million signed up. So they overestimated the coverage impact of Obamacare, and they might be overestimating the impact of, how many people might lose coverage under the Republican plan. But I think, the bigger point here is we shouldn't get caught up in these coverage numbers. Obamacare failed in large part because it focused on the number of people that we can get covered. And it's easy to cover somebody. It's easy to give somebody an insurance card, easy to throw people into Medicaid. What's much, much harder, what I hope the Republicans will focus on, is delivering health care in the most efficient way.
Yeah.
Because just because you have coverage doesn't mean that you have access to a good provider network and to the care that you need when you need it. And that's a different metric for success. And that's the metric we should be using when it comes to how successful our health policies are.
Prior to Obamacare, people would not have understood what you're talking about. But with the premium increases the last couple of years, they realize if you've got a $700 a month premium or $8,000 a year, whatever that comes out to, and a $6,000 deductible, you're probably never going to get any benefits out of that plan unless you have a major health crisis.
Sure, and I think there's an important distinction between what liberals generally want. They want something that they say is universal coverage, but they don't just want universal coverage. They want to redefine what it means to have insurance coverage, because insurance, prior to the Affordable Care Act, and basically in every other industry, insurance means you buy a policy and it's risk rated. That means you get a price that varies according to your risk, to the chance that you're going to file a claim and how much that claim might cost. And it also means that you only use that insurance policy when you do have something unexpected happen to you. And that's certainly not how we use health insurance. That's not how we've used health insurance in the United States for many decades. And the Affordable Care Act really, made into law, unfortunately, the idea that insurance coverage should cover many things from the first dollar. And that's a very inefficient way to pay for health care. It's one of the reasons why health insurance costs have gone up so much under the law. But I would say that, conservatives want universal coverage as well. We want people to make the choice to buy insurance coverage that suits their needs and that functions as real insurance, not a government-mandated one-size-fits-none type of policy.
Boy, that's the truth. Truer words were never said, but we've got people like Susan Collins now coming out saying that health care is a basic right. I mean, that's Bernie Sanders kind of stuff. She just needs to be quiet. I don't know. Hadley, Heath Manning with the Independent Women's Forum. I'll direct people to your website, iwf.org. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.